We're on part 9 of Introduction to 3D Studio Max, building the death scene, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about rendering through mental ray. Now before I begin, I want to show you viewport feedback for your lights and your shadows. All you have to do is click here on Shaded and click Realistic. Now it's not completely accurate, but it gives you a good idea of how your lights are set up in your scene. So I'm going to click back on to Shaded. I'm going to go Alt-W to minimize the scene, and I'm going to click on the light back here, hit Delete. I'll click on this light, hit delete, and before I delete the last light, because I will use mental ray lights, I'm going to move it outside my scene so it doesn't emit or light this room. Now I'm going to go up to my render setup. I'm going to stay in default scanline render because I want to test something to show you guys. So I'm going to hit single, I'm going to change the size just so I can test, and uncheck render, or save I should say. And I'm going to click this viewport and click render. Now, you're seeing the material here on the surface of the monitor because it's emitting light. However, that material is actually not illuminating the scene. You're seeing a little bit in reflections, but that's it. The scene is actually not getting any light from this material. Mental ray will change that. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to click on the render setup. I'm going to choose default scanline and change it to mental ray. Now, if you don't have these tabs, go to your common tab, go all the way down to the bottom, assign render, and click mental ray. Click OK. Now if I render this scene, I'm getting lighting in the room. And because mental ray uses what we call global illumination, so it understands materials as being able to emit light. And the other thing that mental ray does is it actually causes light to bounce around the scene. So each object that emits light, whether it's a light source or a material, those light rays coming off of it bounce off other objects and starts bouncing around the scene. Okay, so it's creating a fake realistic lighting scenario, if that makes any sense. A fake realistic. It's more realistic when it comes to a 3D environment, I'll put it that way. So I have controls down here to change some of the settings if I want to increase quality. Each time I dial these controls up, it will increase rendering time though, but it will always give me a better result on the back end. Final gather. That deals specifically for the global illumination and giving me better results. So if you're seeing noise on your walls or in the blacks, just increase your final gather precision, but give you a heads up that will increase rendering time. So let me go ahead and close this and delete this last light and go to my create panel, or my create panel, lights, change it to standard, and I'm going to use mental ray omni light. In fact, actually I'm going to do mental ray area spot and draw my light through the window. Start with this light, and might as well just try rendering the scene. First of all, let me see if the light is generating shadows. It does have shadows on, ray trace shadows. Intensity set to 1. I'm going to bring this down to, let's say, 0.5, and I'll give it a little bit of blue. Let's go somewhere around in here, just a tint of blue coming through the window. And I think that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and test render this. So I'm going to go render. Now, mental ray also uses your CPU cores. So the little cores inside your CPU, little brains inside your CPU, it uses one for each box. In my case, I have a dual core CPU, but it's hyper-threaded to 4 cores. So that's why I'm getting these 4 little boxes. Of course, newer machines should render out faster. This is a pretty old machine, but you're seeing the end result. So now I'm getting more light coming into the scene, which is really nice. Oops. I think my puppy is actually having a nightmare. That's what you're hearing in the background. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is looking good. Of course, I can keep playing with it. If I want to illuminate the globe a little bit more, I need to bring in another light to cast more light in my scene. But you do have to be careful because, again, mental ray deals with bounce lighting. So the more light I add, the harder it is going to be to control the scene. So let me go ahead and hit cancel. Close this out. Let me go to the create panel. Let's do mental ray omni. Place it in my scene. I'm going to move it up somewhere around in here. Let's go to the modify panel. So I do have the same settings like I've used before. Multiplier, I'm going to bring this down to, let's say, 0.2, and I will set it to white. and use far. I'm actually going to, do you want to try decay? Not in this case. I'm actually going to use the far attenuation. So let me dial down the start point to somewhere around there, and the end point to, let's say, somewhere around there. And let's see what result this gives me. Is there anything else? Advanced effects? No, don't need anything. Shadow parameters. I'm using ray trace shadows this time. I'm good. If I wanted to, I can use mental ray shadow map. And with that, let's go shadow map parameters. Good. Density, color. I just wanted to make sure. Advanced effects, contrast, diffuse. Mental ray shadow map. I will bring this up to, let's say, 20. Let's do 1024. 1024. Samples. I'm going to bring that up to like 8. Remember that blurs between the pixels, and let's try that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render. So you can see here, I definitely have much more light in the scene. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop it and keep moving forward. So I'm going to close this. I'm not actually happy with using this light. Maybe I could dial down the multiplier. Whoops, this is the inside light, 0.5. Let's go 0.2. I don't know. I thought I did that. 0.2 on the light. Let me make sure I didn't apply it to this. Nope. Maybe this can even be brought down to, let's say, 0.4. And I'm going to go 0.1. Maybe even increase the start. And let's try that. Okay, so I'm still adding too much light. I was just really trying to pull out the globe, give the globe a little bit more light to it so it's visible. But I'm not really liking it. Probably the best case scenario for this particular setup is to go cancel, close this, and delete this light. Let's go to the monitor. Let's see if this is still in group mode. Nope. Okay, so I'm going to drag select over the monitor and all its elements. And let's pull it back. Let's say to about there, and I'm going to slightly rotate it. That way it should cast a little more light into the overall scene. And of course I missed, let me undo this. I had a bunch of other options in here, like the sticky notes and these extra little elements in here. You select those and deselect the cable. Now I can position this. There we go. Now I'm not losing anything. Rotate it a little bit. Let's try something like that. And of course I need to adjust my spline. And let's adjust this one as well so it's not going through the wall, even though I don't really think we see it too much in our scene. Still. Okay, so let's try rendering that out. And of course I deleted the middle light that I had in the room. So now I'm just trying to get this light from the material to emit the scene a little bit better to maybe catch the globe. It's better. It's still not amazing. So this gives me more of a realistic output for my lighting. I'm not faking it. Let me go ahead and close this, and I'm actually going to undo all that because I liked it the way it was before. And for now, I'm going to leave everything as is, except for, whoops, I just moved the camera. Let's start talking about mental ray materials. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the material editor. And I'll just select this first material, and I'm going to say Get Material. Now, when you deal with mental ray, you get this whole new tab with mental ray materials. So you got Arc and Design materials. I mean, just a lot of options here. And you also get pre-made materials for glass, wall, plastic, stone, just a lot of good stuff in here. Now, if you don't see this, you need to click this little icon right here and go Open Material Library. And it's going to be on your C drive, Program Files, Autodesk, the version of Max you're using, and look for Material Libraries. So Material Libraries, and you can see here there's several options. So you can click on those and start importing them. So I'm going to hit cancel for now because I already got it in here. So let's say like the glass. Let's go to the glass tab. And I get lots of options. I got glazing glass options. And I also have standard glass options. So in this case, I think clear would be a good, oops, I don't want to be moving the camera around, an option for these two glass pieces. So I'm going to click clear. I'm going to double click it to apply it into my scene here. And apply. So now I have that material on these two glass pieces. I'm going to go to the next material slot over, get material, and let's say, there's lots of options. Maybe a frosted blue. Double click this. So that's applied to my scene. So let me grab the cup here and say apply to cup. Okay. So now we're getting more of a realistic material structure in our scene. Now, of course, these things have different types of controls. These two will probably have very similar controls. I have options to choose how it's interacting with the color. So I have clear, green, gray, blue, etc., etc. I have custom color control, so I can use a map or color by object. And of course, I can click in here and actually choose a specific color. Here's the reflectance. In this case, with the glass on this is the table, I want to have it very reflective. And the refraction is set to glass, which is the standard refraction. Now, roughness deals with how, I want to say how rough the surface is, but really it's about blurring out the reflection. So and the refraction, so it's not so hard. In this case, it would be pretty clean and not blurred out, so I'm not going to really apply roughness. But car paint, definitely dial this up because car paint doesn't give you a perfect reflection. It gives you a very blurry reflection. So just keep that in mind. So reference pattern, if I'm trying to add a pattern like water, round corners, this actually can help clean up corner problems for rendering. And then of course, if you want to increase the samples to make the rendering better, you can, but again, that will decrease rendering time. And you can override the overall scene depth by clicking enable and choosing how much overriding you're doing for the ray tracing on the depth. This is for refraction. And refraction is when light passes through an object and back out, and reflection is when light bounces off an object and goes into your eye. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the cup one. You can see here the roughness is really high. I'm actually going to bring that back down so it's not so high. I can sample the scene by clicking this right here, and that will give me feedback. You can see here it's kind of blurring it out. If I bring it all the way up, blurs it out a lot. Bring it all the way down, and I didn't really go all the way up, but you're seeing the end result. I can choose the type of glass, if I have alcohol in it, if it's quartz, diamonds, lots of options in here. So I think that's pretty good. So let's do the walls. All right, so I'm going to click on the next material over, get material, and this time let's go into, let's say, wall paint. And you have wall covering if you want to do wallpapers. I don't know why you would. I mean, maybe you're doing an old 1960s, 70s home look. More than welcome to use the wallpapers. Not a fan myself. Okay, so you have glossy matte painting, wall paint, or you have matte, which is a flat non-gloss. So let's say the beige. I like the beige. Double click this, and of course I can change the color here if I don't like it. I'm going to select my walls. You can see here wall 01, apply it. So now I'm using a mental ray material for the walls. And of course I can choose how it looks for the finish, application, if it's spray, brush, or roller. Let's try brush. And I have ambient occlusion. That's basically a fake lighting scenario where when objects are close together, it will get darker in those areas. I'm not going to turn it on. Round corners I'm good with, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and choose render. And like I said, now we're actually using more realistic scenario for our glass and our wall paint. Not really seeing too much of a difference in the small render here, and of course when I encode this, you're probably not going to see a difference at all because it's going to degrade some of the quality. But like I said, I'm just trying to show you this stuff so you can play with it and apply it to your scene. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. Close this. All right. So the next thing that Mental Ray gives you the ability to do is Caustics, and that's when light bounces through an object and then splashes out. So, or even bounces off an object. So let's say light bounced off this glass and created hot spots on the wall. Or if light bounced through this cup, it would create maybe a fractal rainbow color somewhere. It depends on the lighting, the color, all that stuff. So let's go ahead and go to the Render Setup tab. And we're going to go to Global Illumination tab. And this is where you can control, again, the global illumination settings like Final Gather. It's set to draft right now. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. So here, Caustics. This is where we can actually enable Caustics with light bouncing through objects. Now there's a couple of things that you have to be aware of when you enable this, and that is the objects themselves have to be prepped for Caustics, and a light source needs to be prepped for Caustics. So I'm going to add another light source back in the scene to show you this. But let me go ahead and click Enable. Multiplier, I'm going to say 10, just so we can really see the results of the Caustics happening. And photon mapping, I'm not going to worry about, but I could enable this as well. And I think that's pretty much it that I really need to activate for now. I could choose right here, geometry properties, all objects generate and receive GIA and Caustics. Let's check this. Well, actually, let me keep it unchecked and show you what happens when I don't have anything in my scene. It's going to give me a warning sign about there's nothing in my scene to generate Caustics. So I'm going to click OK and hit cancel. And let me check this and see if it still gives me that warning sign. There are no caustic photon emitters. So it cleaned up part of the warning sign, which was the objects themselves, but it did not clean up the light problem because I need a light to generate Caustics. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to hit cancel, close this. I'm going to uncheck this because I want only specific objects in my scene to generate Caustics. So I'm going to go ahead and close this as well. So let's say the glass. I'm going to right click and say Object Properties, and I'm going to go to Mental Ray tab, and right here, Generate Caustics. Okay, and I'm going to do that for these two objects as well. Object Properties, Generate Caustics. Okay, because those are glass elements, and that's what's going to affect Caustics the most. And let's go ahead and create a light in our scene to generate Caustics. So let's go to Create Panel. Let's just do a Mental Ray Omni Light. Create it in our scene. Let me dial the light up. And just for an example of Caustics, I'm going to set the multiplier to 1. Maybe put it to about here. Let's just see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and let's save this, by the way, save as, and I'm going to save it into my 3D folder, but I'm going to call this Desk Mental Ray. Mental Ray _1. Okay. And let's click render. Now it's going to give me the warning because I didn't set the light up properly. So let's select the light, right click, Object Properties, and choose, what do I want to choose? Generate Caustics. All right, that should be it. Let me make sure. Advanced lighting. Good, user defined. Okay, so let's click OK. Make sure we have the right viewport selected, click render. And now you can see here it's adding an extra calculation, the photon emission. I have an awful lot of light coming in this scene now because of this extra light that I added. But you can see here there's hot spots on the walls now. And that's because the light's bouncing off these desk tables and creating these hot spots. So, pretty cool results. Just, of course, oversaturated for the look and feel I want to do in the scene. But at least now you know how to create the lighting scenario that Caustics creates. So if you got an ocean scene or underwater scene or a cup on the desk that you want to create very realistic results with lighting, This is how you do it. So I'm going to hit cancel. And like I said, these are the hotspots generated from caustics from the objects in the scene. So let me go ahead and control this light because it's just way out of control. So I'm going to check use for the far attenuation, and let's go multiplier, go 0.5, and let's see what the end result is. So again, it's got to generate the photon emission. And that's much better. Now the hotspots are definitely way overwhelming, so we need to adjust that. Let's go ahead and hit cancel. Go into the material editor. Actually, no, sorry, the renderer setup. Need to have this open. And let's go to global illumination, caustics, and let's generate only 5. Multiplier of 5. Now sample photons, you can see here, these are the photons being generated from the caustics. Now that doesn't look that great, so let's go ahead and increase this to, let's say, 200. And the more you increase this, of course, the longer the rendering time, but also the better the result is. So let's go ahead and hit render and see what we have now. Okay, so the caustics are a little bit less extreme because we decreased the multiplier, and we're getting more little dots to smooth them out because we increased it by 200. So let me go ahead and hit cancel. It's still too hot though, so let's go back to a multiplier of, let's say, 2 and photons of 300. Click render. And it's toned it down even more. Still don't like how bright it is. So I'm going to go 400 and go 0.5. And that toned it down way down. And you can see it smoothed out because I've added more samples, photon samples. So it creates a better look. So that's pretty cool. And because of the caustics, I'm starting to get those highlights on the monitor that are the globe that I wanted. So that's even better. So I'm going to hit cancel. Let's go to the light settings. Probably bring this center light down to 0.3. Actually, I'm going to go 0.1, way down. Let's see, area light parameters, mental ray. Is there anything else I need to? So I can actually control caustic photons from this actual light by playing with it here. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to let automatically calculate energy photons checked. And go ahead and minimize this. So let's go ahead and multiplier 0.3. Actually, let's leave it. Let's see what end result we have, because we lowered the brightness of the light. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel and do one last render pass, but this time I'm going to, let's go to my render setup. Oops, I just had that open. Common tab, let's increase the size to, let's do 1920 and do a render. Of course, now that it's a larger file, it's going to take a lot longer to render. I might actually pause this here in a sec, we'll see. And I'm actually just trying to point out to see if I can see noise, because we're using a draft for the setting of final gather precision. Because we have such low light, I'm not too sure if we're really going to see a difference. You can see here, obviously increasing the file size definitely increases render time. Now it's going through and calculating on the scene. And there is a bit of noise on the wall. Like I said, you probably can't tell because of the rendering, but it is there. And to control that, I would just increase the final gather. But trust me when I tell you, be warned, because you will have far more, what's the word I'm looking for? Render times, or higher render times, I guess, instead of saying far more, higher render times when you do that. So let me go ahead and stop this and let it render all the way through and show you the final result. And of course, before I do, when you're getting ready to reset it up for animation, just make sure you recheck save, maybe even save it as something else. Let me cancel this. So save it as a different file like mental rate output, and make sure you have your active time segments if you're going to render out an animation. So I'm going to go ahead and close, and let's let this thing render. Okay, so I'm back. Here's the final output. I noticed that my mouse had somehow gotten flipped around, but anyway. Let's see here. So the settings, I put it to Caustics multiplier, I set to 0.2. Photon samples, I set to 1000. And I set the filter to a Gauss. And that's pretty much all I changed. Didn't add anything else. And the final gather, sorry, I set it to medium, as you can see down here. So this was my final output. Let me go ahead and maximize it. This is 100%. Bring this all the way open. Okay. As you can see in here, the caustics on the wall look good. And that's because, again, bringing up the photons to 1000 and changing the blur factor between the photons to Gauss help blur it and create a better look. And of course, increasing the final gather gave me an overall better look as well. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I think that should call it quits for Introduction to 3D Studio Max, building a death scene.